The asphalt of small-town America is usually silent, disturbed only by the mundane drone of daily life. But sometimes, that silence is shattered by a deeper rumble, the unmistakable thunder of 4 iron horses, signaling the arrival of the kind of men mothers warn their daughters about. We're talking about the Bandidos Motorcycle Club. If you know anything about the MC world, you know the reputation precedes them. Outlaws, bad news, the kind of people who deal in shades of grey the rest of us are too scared to even acknowledge. But tonight, in the chilling glow of a Friday night high school football practice, those labels were about to be severely tested, because tonight, the bad guys weren't the ones riding Harleys. This story takes place in Havenwood, a town so quiet. Its biggest news is usually the change in the library's operating hours. The local high school football team, the Havenwood Hawks, were the pride of the community. Their coach, a man named Marcus the Hammer Hayes, was a local legend. Hayes had a state championship ring from his playing days, and he coached with an intensity that bordered on tyranny. He believed in discipline, pain, and absolute submission. His practices weren't just drills, they were trials by fire. Most parents tolerated it, muttering that boys need to be toughened up. They chose to look away from the red faces and the silent tears. They certainly looked away from the way Hayes singled out the smaller, quieter kids, mistaking shyness for weakness. One of those kids was a 15-year-old freshman named Ethan. Ethan was all heart, all effort, but physically, he hadn't caught up yet. He was doing his best, struggling through the grueling lineman drills, his helmet slightly too big for his head. During a routine tackling exercise, Ethan missed a block. It wasn't intentional. He was exhausted, his body screaming for a break, but the failure was enough to trip the wire in Coach Hayes. The coach exploded. He marched across the field, his heavy boots kicking up dust, his face a mask of scarlet fury. He didn't yell an instruction. He didn't offer criticism. He just stopped directly in front of Ethan. The other players froze, their helmets tilted, watching the predictable storm brewing. Then, it happened. A sharp, sickening sound that cut through the humid evening air. Hayes didn't just grab the boy. He hauled Ethan's face mask up with one hand, exposing the vulnerable chin strap and jaw, and delivered a quick, hard slap across the side of Ethan's helmet. It was forceful enough to snap the boy's head back, hard enough that the shock traveled through the plastic and into his skull. Ethan staggered, his eyes wide and glazed over, but he didn't cry. He just stood there, swaying, holding his ground, refusing to show the weakness the coach demanded he overcome. Hayes stood over him, breathing heavily, triumph and disgust warring on his face. "Get back in the drill, softy. You think life is going to go easy on you?" he snarled, before turning away to address the terrified team. It was a moment of utter silence, a moment that should have been interrupted by an angry parent or an assistant coach. But the assistant coach just looked down, and the few parents watching from the bleachers, bound by a collective fear of confronting the local legend, remained seated, shifting uncomfortably. They had chosen silence. But the field wasn't truly isolated. Less than 100 yards away, tucked behind the sparse trees bordering the practice lot, sat a diner famous for its deep-fried pies and strong black coffee, a favorite stop for travelers and sometimes for men who preferred the shadows. In a booth near the back, 4 men sat finishing their meal. They were unmistakable, vests bearing the Bandidos patch, heavy silver rings on their hands, and faces that looked like they had seen too many sunsets from the saddle of a roaring machine. There was Gravel, the giant of the group, whose face was mostly hidden by a thick grey beard. Viper, lean, with eyes that never missed a detail. Torch, who always looked bored until the moment he didn't. And leading them, the chapter president, a man only known as Saint. The irony of that name was lost on no one. They hadn't come for the football practice, they were just passing through. But the sound, that sharp, unmistakable smack that carried across the quiet field, cut through their casual dinner conversation. Viper was the first to look up, his eyes narrowing. He didn't need to ask. They all knew what that sound meant. It wasn't the sound of 2 helmets colliding. It was the sound of an adult hitting a child. Saint didn't even say a word. He simply wiped his mouth with a napkin, tossed it onto the table, and pushed his heavy frame out of the booth. Gravel and Torch followed immediately, their large bodies filling the doorway. Viper paused only long enough to drop a $20 bill on the check, a silent apology to the waitress who was already backing away from the scene. They moved with an economy of motion, the slow, rolling gait of men used to confrontation, but this time their steps were aimed not toward a rivalry or a turf war, but toward a frightened boy and an abusive man. They walked side by side across the parking lot and onto the track, the rhythmic clack of their boots on the asphalt announcing their presence with far more authority than any whistle. Coach Hayes, still chewing out his team, was the last to notice them. He was interrupted mid-sentence by the shadow cast by the four enormous figures. When he finally turned, his face, still flushed with anger, morphed into confusion, then annoyance, and finally, a flicker of genuine fear. These men didn't belong here. They smelled of leather, oil, and a history that the quiet town of Havenwood usually only saw on television. "Practice is closed," Hayes snapped, trying to project dominance. His voice was loud, but it lacked the conviction he usually possessed. The players, including Ethan, looked up, completely distracted, finding a strange comfort in the interruption. The line between the Hawks and the Bandidos was now the most interesting part of the evening. Saint stepped forward, his expression unreadable, a slow, deliberate movement that commanded attention. He stood taller than Hayes, broader than Gravel, and his eyes, a deep, unsettling blue, were fixed entirely on the coach. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't posture. He just spoke, and his voice was a low, resonant baritone that carried perfectly over the stillness of the field. "We saw what you did, Coach," Saint said, the word coach dripping with contempt. "We saw you lay a hand on that boy." Hayes, sensing the danger, tried to pivot, adopting his authoritative tone. "That's none of your business. This is my team, my practice. I'm teaching discipline. You all need to leave, now, or I call the police." Gravel, who had been silent, let out a slow, guttural laugh that sounded like stones tumbling down a hill. The threat of calling the police against four known outlaws was frankly comical. Torch just crossed his massive arms, his eyes scanning the surrounding area, ensuring no one interfered with the upcoming conversation. Viper, meanwhile, walked slowly past the coach, toward the group of frozen players. He stopped next to Ethan. He didn't touch the boy, didn't say anything, but his presence was a shield. The boy looked up at the fearsome man, and for the first time since the slap, Ethan's shoulders seemed to relax. Saint took another step closer to Hayes. "You talk about discipline," he stated, his voice gaining an edge. "But what you showed out here wasn't discipline, Coach. It was cowardice. You hit a kid who was already giving everything he had. That's not making a man. That's just making a scared kid." He paused, letting the accusation hang in the air, allowing the coach to feel the weight of his actions under the gaze of men who understood real violence, real hardship, and real codes of conduct. The Bandidos lived by a strict, albeit twisted, code of their own, and abusing the weak was not on it. Hayes stammered, his bravado crumbling. He started to protest, mentioning the pressure to win, the team standing, anything to justify the assault. But Saint simply cut him off with a raised hand, a gesture more potent than any shout. The sun had finally set, and the field lights cast long, ominous shadows around the confrontation. The stage was set not for a brutal fight, but for a quiet reckoning. The outlaws had come to Havenwood not to steal or to fight for territory, but to enforce a kind of justice the town had failed to deliver. The man who wore the title of outlaw was about to teach the local hero a lesson about being a true protector. Coach Hayes, stripped of his authority by the silent, imposing presence of the four Bandidos, tried one last desperate move. He puffed out his chest and pointed a trembling finger at Saint. "You think you can just march onto a private school field and threaten me? Get your crew and get out before I call the actual authorities. You people don't belong here." It was a bold, but hollow challenge. Hayes knew that for men like Saint, the actual authorities were more of an annoyance than a deterrent. The silence from the bleachers, where the few parents remained frozen, was deafening. Their inaction spoke volumes. They were choosing their comfort over the safety of a child. Saint didn't react to the threat. Instead, he looked past Hayes, directly at Ethan, who was still standing near Viper. Ethan's eyes, full of fear just moments ago, now held a strange mix of confusion and cautious relief. Saint's gaze returned to the coach. "We're not here to fight you, coach. We're here because you crossed a line. And where we come from, you don't cross that line and walk away clean." He took a slow, deliberate step back, signaling that the direct confrontation was over, for now. Hayes visibly relaxed, mistaking the retreat for a victory. But the Bandidos weren't done. Gravel stepped forward, his massive frame eclipsing Hayes entirely. Unlike Saint, who spoke with controlled intensity, Gravel's voice was a low, rough rumble. He didn't speak to Hayes. He spoke to the whole team, his voice carrying an unexpected weight of experience. "Listen up, kids," he commanded, and every player, every assistant coach, and every spectator was instantly riveted. "The jacket you wear, the name on your back, it means something. This patch," he tapped the Bandidos insignia on his vest, "it tells the world we live by our own rules. But even the outlaws know, real strength isn't about hurting the weak. It's about protecting them." Gravel's impromptu speech, delivered with the stark honesty of the streets, was more impactful than any motivational poster Hayes had ever put up. He then turned to Hayes, his voice dropping dangerously low. "You put your hands on that boy again, coach, and you won't be dealing with the police. You'll be dealing with us. You understand? This is a warning. It's not a threat. It's a promise." Torch, who had been silent, finally moved. He walked over to the sidelines, picked up a discarded water bottle and tossed it gently to Ethan, who caught it automatically. It was a simple, small act of acknowledgement, a silent message. "We see you. You matter." Then Torch glanced pointedly at Hayes and then back at the boy. The message was clear. There was now an unspoken bond of protection around the freshman. Viper, meanwhile, had subtly scanned the bleachers, his sharp eyes identifying the parents who had stayed silent. He walked toward the edge of the track and stopped near the small group. He didn't speak a word, didn't make a gesture, but his presence, the sheer force of an outlaw's judgment, was enough. The parents suddenly found their shoes very interesting. Viper was letting them know that the Bandidos had witnessed their moral failure, their dereliction of duty. He held their collective gaze just long enough for the shame to settle in their stomachs before he slowly turned his back on them. Saint then addressed Hayes one last time, his voice shifting from accusatory to something almost paternal, aimed not just at the coach but at the idea of authority itself. "You call yourself a leader. A leader earns respect. He doesn't beat it out of people. The day you confuse fear with respect is the day you lose everything. And today, coach, you lost the respect of every man standing here, and probably every kid on that field too." With the message delivered, the four men turned in unison. They walked back across the field, their departure as impactful as their arrival. They didn't hurry. They didn't look back. They simply returned to their bikes, their engines roaring to life with a triumphant thunder that chased away the oppressive silence that Hayes's behavior had created. As the rumble faded down the highway, the football practice remained frozen. The aftermath was immediate and profound. Coach Hayes tried to bark orders, but his voice was strained, his authority irrevocably damaged. The players wouldn't look him in the eye. They looked at each other, and then they looked at Ethan, who now stood straighter, his head held high. The four outlaws, the Bandidos, had done what the adults, the parents, and the school system had failed to do. They had stood up for the victim. The story spread through Havenwood like wildfire, amplified, as all good stories are, by the sheer disbelief of the players who witnessed it. The legend of Coach Hayes died that night, replaced by the startling, uncomfortable truth of four rough-looking men in leather vests who held a better moral compass than the town's athletic hero. Within the week, the school board was forced to act. The pressure didn't come from the parents. It came from the players, energized by the bravery they had witnessed. Ethan, encouraged by the silent support of his teammates, finally told his own parents what had happened, and they, spurred by the town's gossip and the undeniable visible evidence of the slap, filed a formal complaint. Hayes was placed on administrative leave, and soon after he was quietly let go. The power structure was broken, not by the law, but by four men who lived outside of it. The Bandidos, the so-called bad guys, had swooped in, delivered justice without violence, and left. They sought no praise, no recognition. They simply righted a wrong. In the quiet darkness of Havenwood, they proved that being an outlaw doesn't mean you can't have a code, and that a heart of gold can sometimes be hidden beneath the toughest, most intimidating leather vest. This wasn't about the MC life. It was about brotherhood, protection, and the silent, unspoken duty to defend the vulnerable. A code more honorable than any trophy or state championship ring. The roar of those 4 bikes that night was the sound of true heroes riding off into the dark, leaving behind a safer, if slightly more bewildered town.